Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shop and Chivalry podcast. My guest, Elizabeth Feder-Hosey, right?
Yes.
All right. God, I was hoping I was going to get that right. So, Elizabeth, you're running for alderman for which ward?
Ward 4.
Okay. Why?
I love Ward 4.
Okay.
I grew up there. I grew up on Water's Edge and, playing in the waters and the woods there. It was a really special, magical childhood.
Okay.
And I wanted to raise my own kids there. So when we came back to Ocean Springs after school, we bought a house in the area as close as we could get, which is right off of Halstead. And I've observed a trend in our local leadership where reckless decision making has hamstrung the city in terms of finances and resources. And I believe I can bring something to the table that's missing. And that's the ability to look at the big picture, think critically, and make informed decisions, and look at the overall plan and figure out how those decisions further the plan.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. Well, what's your background?
I'm an attorney. I specialize in family law and child advocacy. Okay. I'm a court-appointed advocate in Jackson, Harrison, Stone, and Hancock counties. So I'm trained in child abuse investigation, and typically the courts appoint me to do an investigation in abuse cases, but also in non-abuse cases, just complicated divorces and custody disputes where the court wants me to evaluate factors affecting child custody and make a recommendation to the court about, what the best interests of the child are.
Wow, that sounds like a tough job.
It is a tough job.
But rewarding, I imagine.
It is extremely rewarding to know that a lot of times these kids, they get caught in the middle.
Yeah.
Or the system is a bit overworked and strained, and they don't get that one-on-one attention that they need.
I'm sure there's a lot of that.
Social workers, they get burnt out, and I'm sure they get into a pattern sometimes and can miss things. And so usually the court will bring me in when something's really bizarre or complicated and they need someone to kind of fix it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually, I was abused when I was 4, actually. I was born out of wedlock. And so my dad was actually stationed in Holland back then. He flew. Luckily, he was somebody who wanted to actually be involved, and when I was taken away, made a ward of the state of Texas, then he came back, had to fight for custody of me. So I'd imagine somebody like you would have been very much involved in that. So,
yes.
But I would imagine it takes not just a thorough education, a care for what you're doing, a passion for what you're doing, but also an appetite for diligence.
Yes, diligence is crucial because you've really got to look over the details. You've got to look at it objectively too.
Sure.
I mean, people are coming at you with really emotional stories. You have to figure out how to separate that emotion and be objective, and use all the training to figure out, does this pattern of behavior indicate abuse? Or, is this person credible? And so it does take a lot of diligence. You have to, call all the witnesses, try to get, as many viewpoints as possible in order to make that assessment. And I do regular training once a year for that. And that's actually, as hard as it is to do that training, it is the most rewarding part of my job in the year, because most of those people have been through it themselves. And so they are extremely inspirational testaments to what one person in your life can do. Just that one person who can come along and say, the kid's acting out because he's being abused. He's not a bad kid. Something's going on
right
in his house. And, acting out is a huge indicator of abuse and neglect. And then too, there's new science on about how abuse affects your brain chemistry, and that too, like learning disabilities or certain cognitive delays can also be a result of an abusive environment, an unstable environment. So learning about all that is extremely fascinating and inspirational.
How do you separate the your work with children and knowing what you know about how abuse can affect people being maybe unsuccessful later on in life, or maybe with these, how did you describe acting out? How do you separate that from, say, the local politicians who seem to be acting out a lot?
Well, I don't know their personal backgrounds, but I imagine
I am kidding, but yeah.
I imagine that's privilege and lack of real life experience, perhaps.
Sure. Okay. Well, tell me about some of the problems in Ward 4 that you're hoping to address.
Well, with Ward 4, we've got a lot of drainage issues. So we're nestled in between bayous and beaches, and there's a lot of big ditches going on that need attention. And then we also have some like sewage issues. Those might be more citywide. Mm-hmm. Pedestrian traffic is a big issue for a lot of people in our ward. Getting those sidewalks that connect, Holcomb to the beach, Halstead down to the beach, connecting Pecan Park neighborhood. It's really great. You can actually get to that area by going through the Seashore Park, because it connects with the Seashore Park, and then you can come out on Brumbaugh and hop right onto Halstead.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can. So, increasing those those sidewalks, and just, fostering a safer, healthier quality of life. I know my kids play in the streets until the sun goes down. Mm-hmm. I've got a lot of great kids in the neighborhood, and one day I'd like them to be able to just run down to the beach without me watching, and I know they're going to be safe.
Yeah. No, and that sounds like a fine and laudable goal for sure. So, obviously, being an attorney, you're probably pretty comfortable maneuvering around legal issues, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So that brings us to probably our first topic, and that's executive session. Mm-hmm. It seems as though, at least what seems to be palpable, is the feeling that executive session may have been abused here in this last administration. And in particular, we'll talk about a few scenarios, but a few specifics, which I think you might have been or personally invested in, we'll say. And so, yeah, if you want to start, just kind of what are your thoughts of executive session from a municipal standpoint?
I think in this administration that executive session has been abused.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example.
Sure.
So with the Mary C, I think the city, they were the ones threatening us with litigation. And so they contrived this notion of potential litigation, even though they had no grounds to sue us.
So so just to make sure we get this right, they were the ones, they would be the arbiters of the litigation.
Yes.
And they were trying to protect themselves from litigation that they themselves would be the ones bringing forth.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, and I just want to get that right, because to be fair, everybody else that has come on has kind of been in defense to some degree of executive session with the Mary C, and that's from talking with incumbents and whatnot, and people that are, for lack of better words, more supportive of the way the city handled it. And so with you coming on, it is important to get your perspective out, for objectivity. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that's an example.
Yeah.
And instead of, we'll never know what happened in executive session. Of course I hear things from city employees about what they think it was, or, but until the city takes ownership over their real reason, I can't say what it is. I genuinely don't know. I mean, I can.
What do you feel? Are you willing to speculate on that?
I don't think it's fair to spepeculate,
Fair
and that's the attorney in me.
Yeah.
Objection, speculation.
Yeah. I didn't know you were an attorney. So I'm trying to make sure.
Yeah. I think speculation is unfair. But what I can tell you is what they didn't base their decision on, and that's the metrics and the data.
Okay.
The fact is, the Friends, for the first time in a 20-year history, had established an endowment fund. Uh-huh. We were carving out a path to sustainability, because there was a history with the organization where, it would go through these these real lows and real highs, where you'd have a strong board who was fundraising and financially minded and able to have fundraisers and doing everything they could. And then you'd get years where there was board members who were not able to raise the funds or do the work. And so our board came in and we said, this is not good for the organization. We can never really take off if we're constantly trying to save ourselves. When I came on the board, the director couldn't make payroll, and the board had no idea that was even an issue. And so we created a path to sustainability by creating that endowment fund and really, really peeling back the layers of the budget to understand how every single segment of the Mary C. worked. Because you have the Ducat Gallery, you have the Trent Lott Theater, you have the kitchen, you've got the History Museum, you've got it's just these other rooms and classes. What are they doing? How can we utilize them? You've got the theater. So, breaking that budget down to figure out, what it takes to actually run the center. For the first time in its history, the kitchen became a profit center.
Now, that was recently.
Yes.
Right.
That was...
Got a new person managing the kitchen, right? And they put a lot of elbow grease into turning that thing around.
Yeah. So empowering her to take command over the budget. There was no kitchen budget when we started. She was just, said, here you go, here's the kitchen, do something. And so we were able to give her a budget and empower her to do that. We invested in marketing and branding, and for once established a very solid brand and a mission that was compelling to the public. We put signage out front. Mm-hmm. Our membership increased. Our fundraising increased. Our grant funding increased. Attendance increased. Mm-hmm. There was some staff turnover. That's just how things work in business.
Well, and not just that. I mean, I've worked in some nonprofits, and I've led a few organizations, and what you're describing is kind of the typical pattern of nonprofits that have revolving, we'll say, leadership or executive councils. And some people just are not good at leveraging the human capital to move towards something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To move the organization forward, to evolve the organization, because nonprofits are fairly fluid organizations, and if you don't have command of your managing ability, then that will get exposed very quickly, and the organization suffers almost 100% of the time. So it's again, what you're describing is pretty typical of those types of organizations. So to hear that now you're on this path is not only reasonable, but also should be expected, I would think. Once you get the right person at the helm, things just turn around. That's just what happens.
Yeah, and you have to make hard decisions. Mm-hmm. You have to be decisive. You have to make a plan, and you have to stick to it. Yeah. And the data shows that, success is on paper. And our members were happy. And our instructors were happy. They still are. Mm-hmm. We moved on. Same people, new face. Mm-hmm. And so, and the other thing people don't know is that the city actually has a seat on our board, or had, before we evolved. And they just didn't participate. They didn't come to meetings. They didn't review our financials. They really had no idea what was going on unless we called them.
That's such a sad thing, honestly. Mm-hmm. I've been talking... I've started to ask this question more, but it seems to me that the Mary C. is so much a part of the identity of Ocean Springs that perhaps it's an organization that shouldn't be viewed through the lens of budgets, and maybe showing a little red shouldn't be so vilified because of what it means to the city. So in other words, like, it might be permissible. There might need to be a capacity for that place not being profit seeking.
Well, it's a nonprofit.
Right. I know, but and that's the irony of it all, because this comes down to what seems to be, or at least the message is that it's a money thing. Well, they're not profitable. They're not making money. They're losing money. They're costing the city money. Well, to some degree, for a nonprofit, that could be expected. Although I think the goal is just even keel. You know what I mean? You're not seeking profit, but you're self-sustaining, and
that's what all we really wanted to be, was self-sustaining, and not to burden the city, with the management and with the ins and outs, and really just kind of stand out on our own and get funding from other sources. And another thing that's confusing is, the Friends had an annual operating budget of $400,000. And that's, programming, staffing, administration fees, putting on free art shows, doing the history museum, making repairs to the building, buying new hot water heaters, getting electrical work done, all of those things. And that has nothing to do with the investment the city is talking about publicly. Obviously, that's their building. They're going to pay utilities. They need to fix the roof when it's leaking. Public Works is going to be over there taking care of stuff. But regardless of who's managing it, they're going to have those costs.
Yeah.
So the notion that removing the Friends was going to save them money is not based in any fact. I mean, there's nothing to support that they're going to save money. Now they're actually, I don't know what the plan is, because I don't think anybody really does. But, if they're going to hire an arts coordinator, or they're going to put in whatever stuff they want to put in, that's money that the private sector was supplying. So, that's how I see it as a taxpayer. I have no problem with this notion that the city should manage the building. I love that they want to be invested like that. I think the city should, the theater provides rental income. Why the city just gave that away to another nonprofit is questionable to me. I wonder, why did you decide that when you could have been renting it out yourself and getting all those rental fees? You could have still helped the nonprofit by letting them use it, for free or some nominal fee.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder, how smart that decision was, but it's not my problem right now.
Right.
We've moved on, and our organization is doing wonderfully. We have grown out into Pascagoula. We've got programming in East Biloxi. We're trying to launch programming in Moss Point and Gaucher. So the Friends have now become an asset to more of Jackson County and to part of East Biloxi. And our scholarship is growing. We're able to do with less overhead, like we're not having to fix a building that we don't own anymore. So that money can go directly back into the community and programming. So, for us, we're doing great. There's no looking back. I don't ever see a time where the Friends would want to manage that building again. I think we just would like to be welcome there.
Well, my fear is that a controversy like that would force, or at least create less of an incentive to be part of Ocean Springs. And obviously, the Friends have done so much for Ocean Springs, for art, for culture within the city, and it's to me, it's perfectly reasonable that they'd be within the Mary C as it is the sort of cultural nexus of the of Ocean Springs. What's your vision for it? I mean, what would you like to advocate for in a perfect world?
Well, I think I would love to see more people use the Mary C. And that was one of the struggles that I observed when we were there was a theater show would be playing to an half-empty audience. And that hurt me because those actors and actresses were just killing it. They were amazing. And in all the shows that I saw there was multiple theater troupes there, and these artists are giving it their all. And I felt like it was our duty as the organization to put as many, and this was a term we kind of, we used a lot, called butts in seats.
Sure.
We wanted to put as many butts in seats as possible so that the community, because when you're playing to an empty room, how does that serve the community?
Well, there's there's more than just that. How does it serve the artist? You know,
Yeah.
I think I've never been somebody who's been on stage, but I've heard from other people say that the feeling of the audience affects how they perform. So there's an element of that as well. And for those that are trying to practice and gain some sort of tenure within the profession, it seems that you'd want to give them the opportunity to hone that craft, so to speak. So
definitely,
and obviously the money aspect.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and that helps. That's not the underscore.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a conversation about how the money's the most important thing. I assure you. So
yeah, no, the money isn't the most important thing. It is how is it impacting the community, and that's why we launched a scholarship campaign where all of our we call them Friends Plus donors, a portion of their 10% of their donation would go to a scholarship fund. So for the first time, we're giving out free summer camps every year. And all you do is sign up paper saying, I want to go to camp. Perfect. I mean, there's no deep dive into why you should go to camp. It's just a kid says, I want to go to camp. And, trying to do more school shows to where the kids would come and go to the Christmas show or what have you, so that they could be part of that experience. Because I grew up being exposed to arts and culture. We went to shows in Mobile and New Orleans and New York City, and it really impacted me, and I think helped shape my worldview. And we wanted to be able to offer that in Ocean Springs. And so, everything we did was just to make things better. And unfortunately, the city wasn't supportive of us for whatever reason, and we just took the show on the road.
Excellent. Okay. Well, yeah, and it wasn't. It was uncomfortable and unfortunate black eye, and as I've said many times on the show before, it felt as if you're watching parts of your family air out their dirty laundry online. And it's one of those things where, like, if you got problems with the family, you solve it in private.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what bugged me the most, because that's literally what it felt like.
Well, and I asked for meetings, our vice chair asked for meetings, and then it got to a point where anything we were being told, it was just there was a lot of it was very confusing, and we were never given a straight answer on a lot of things. There's more press that we didn't take than did. I mean, I gave a courtesy interview to each of the news outlets. And then as they kept trying to, pull more information out, I just said, this isn't serving us. Because it was painful for the community to see our pain. And there's so many things that happened to us that were not shared with the public because of the pain that they would cause.
Right.
The fact that we were sent a letter 10 days before Christmas saying, if you don't give us everything that we rejected the night before, we're going to sue you. So during our Christmas holidays, we're like, well, all right, we might get sued in January.
Yeah.
But you know what? We're tough, and we believe in our mission.
Resilient, obviously.
Yeah, resilient. And we pivoted, and it benefited the organization. We're still serving the community like we always have. And, hopefully with, this will be just water under the bridge at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you prevent something like that in the future as an alderman?
You actually ask, why is this happening? You don't just say, well, the other alderman told me to do this, so I'm going to do it. Or you don't say, well, it's not in my ward, it doesn't affect me. Well, half of the board is in your ward. The members live in your ward. This impacts them. You say, whoa, guys, what are we doing? Let me talk to my people. Let's sit down and see what's going on.
Yeah.
But instead they just, defer to each other. And I think that's how my alderman handled it. And he did try to support us after the fact, after, he realized that how expensive it is to do programming. But, ultimately it wasn't enough advocacy to prevent all the pain and suffering.
Yeah. Melanie Allen talked about how she'd like to see the organization become a destination, for art and culture and whatnot. People come in and maybe through partnership, through Airbnb type of places, people can stay and spend a weekend doing some sort of like Southern, Gulf Coast type of art internship, if you will. My only concern about programming, and I don't think this is a common thing, and it might have been an anomaly, but there were classes being taught at the Mary C for free that were also, or maybe lower cost, that were taught downtown at like one of the brick and mortar stores. And it felt as if they were competing with business. Mm-hmm. That's my only concern. I'd like to, just to make sure that there's not competing interests that might be drawing away from say, a small business owner. Well,
that's the great thing about the free market is that everybody is able to offer programming. Our instructors are also working artists and business people. Mm-hmm. So by, engaging with them, we're also fueling the economy. Mm-hmm. And whether it's culinary or arts, we have several private galleries who offer art classes. We have, a good friend of mine just opened a little art studio in Ocean Springs where she's, doing workshops. Competition is good, and the competition keeps people doing better because they're competing, and there should be competition in a friendly way. Mm-hmm. I know that's what we try to do is, we're an arts and culture organization, but WAMA offers classes. We're offering classes too. We can still partner with them. And so I don't know why competition is such a bad thing. That to me seems like one of the undergirdles of capitalism is competition. So, anyone who complains about that should maybe elevate their game a bit.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's a good point. I'd say to your point, by virtue of people attending the class, they're probably filling some sort of market void that's not being tapped into, and if it gets to the point where it's too costly to put it on, the Friend, the Mary C in general will likely stop putting that class on. So again, to your point, but
and it's less about a class and more about an experience. So one of our instructors, she'll have a child from when they're like 6 or 7, and she'll be their teacher until they graduate from high school. And so she's creating a life experience for these kids where this is the place where they thrive. This is where they fit in. They might not be an athlete. They might not be a cheerleader. They might not, be good at playing an instrument or band, but they really find themselves in their art class where they can grow and be comfortable and be challenged. They'll do critiques of each other's work and learn skills. So, it's less about, I'm just going to go to a class and call it a day. It's an experience that's very important in the lives of many people that participate in it. And that's why we're trying to bring it out into other parts of Jackson County too, because I know there's Moss Point is underserved and Pascagoula is underserved with those type of offerings. And so, we're hoping we can, enrich the quality of life through these experiences.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, if we can just jump back real quick to executive session. I'd like to take the opportunity here as having an attorney to talk to. What's a good use of executive session? When would you be a proponent of executive session?
So I think executive session is, I can't, as an attorney would tell you, you can't foresee and give advice on every single hypothetical that exists.
Not good enough.
But litigation needs to be imminent. It needs to be on the precipice. There needs to be a conversation between the two parties or some sort of formal, legal document where, or you just have questions about, is this permitted by law if it's a real tricky situation? And then you go in and you get your legal advice, but then you should come out and tell the people how you voted.
Ideally there wouldn't be a vote done
ideally there wouldn't be, but so you'd come out and if litigation is actually pending, then obviously if you don't want to say anything that's gonna, make the other person's case, I don't know. I just feel like it's been abused, and I know if I ever get called back to executive session, I'm not going to just sit quietly. I will ask the questions. I will, hold the other aldermen accountable. And if it's a questionable situation, I'm going to let the public know, like, we shouldn't be back here. We shouldn't be doing this. And that's the level of accountability that I've observed to be lacking.
Well, you'd be a formidable person to have in that room, because you are an attorney, and I think it might force the city attorney to kind of up their game a bit. So I could definitely see the benefit there. But you talked about the Mary C. being an experience, and Ocean Springs is kind of an experience. Being in air traffic control. I trained at Keesler, and so anybody who's in air traffic control who's an air traffic controller who has a military background knows Ocean Springs, because that's where they come to hang out and whatnot. My worry is that maybe we're turning Ocean Springs into too much of a bar crawl, like just cleaner Bourbon Street experience. How do you view downtown?
Yeah, I think downtown's great.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like that experience, there's other little parts of downtown you can enjoy. Porter Avenue is really taking off, and I think it's going to be a great arts and culture district. You can go further down the street, and the Mary C., there was plenty of programming that I would have loved to see. I hate to jump around, but I would love to see the front yard be a public art garden, and people, little jazz in the evening, and people could do a more leisurely stroll and have their evening cocktail down there on the lawn. So sure. I think with the right kind of vision and planning, we can cultivate different experiences within that same footprint to offer that to people. And, unless the bar owners are complaining about the business, I don't see, why we need to fool with it. But there's part of me that wants to preserve, those parts of Ocean Springs that haven't developed like that. East Beach is an example. I grew up on that beach. My husband proposed to me there. I got married there. It's so serene, and the natural resources are beautiful. And, I really would like to see that preserved. More living shoreline, maybe some more dunes. And I just, I worry about the overdevelopment of that. So I think for me, I bring a lot of, a dynamic view for the city. I think as long as the people downtown are happy, the store owners and the bar owners, as long as they're happy and doing well, I support that. And then there's other parts of town where the pace should definitely be a little slower. That's one of the things I love about Ocean Springs is the pace, where everybody seems to be a bit more relaxed, and you can take those leisurely strolls and watch the sunset, or just cruise around in your golf cart. So, I think downtown's great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely changed from when I went to school here.
Oh yeah,
yeah, pretty much past Pleasance. To a large degree, there wasn't much there.
Yeah,
So
I know there was nothing there when I was growing up. I mean, the corner was that old gas station.
That's right.
And I remember last time I ran, somebody in my ward, I encountered him, and he was upset that the old gas station was gone because he felt like it was a piece of history.
Yeah.
We didn't really agree about that, but. But yeah, no, I remember when like Chris Kwiatkowski and Patrick Sullivan, I mean, they were like kind of the trailblazers of the Government Street bar scene.
Yeah.
They're in my ward too. So there's a lot of like amazing, talented entrepreneurs in Ward 4, and they bring that creative spirit to the community of Ocean Springs. And that's also why I love Ward 4 is the people there.
Yeah.
There's a real special community of people. The Duncan, the bike shop guy, and, Maison Deleu and Hillier House and all these great iconic places in Ocean Springs.
Well, in preserving those businesses and kind of expanding, downtown, I'm a bit concerned that we're going to reach a point of diminishing marginal returns because we can't. The way downtown's set up with the traffic problems that exist, you can put businesses there, but they won't receive the capacity of people because they'll be deterred because it's not a pleasant experience getting down there.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on solving the traffic problems that is Government Street?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think we're fortunate in that our city blocks are so small that, if we can come up with a traffic flow plan, I haven't looked into it enough to say my opinion is very well informed. I just know that off the top of my head and looking at it, I think one way on a portion of Government Street might help. What we need to do is just figure out how we can direct people to park in and around, and
the signage is terrible.
Encourage walking. One of my favorite cities in Mississippi is Oxford, and it faced the same thing. It's kind of like we've got how do you get downtown? Like how do people get downtown? And then you get to a point where I don't even want to go downtown. But I think if we can kind of cultivate walkability, or maybe even make a special golf cart parking lot somewhere, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fine. And unless this, when the store owners start to complain or they've noticed a decline, I hope the city will look at that. I mean, I certainly would. But yeah, I feel like that problem is a bit far out, but something we should plan for. And I think that's one of the other things that I'm going to bring to the table is that I can look out and see that vision and anticipate those problems and plan for them, plan accordingly. Because what I've observed is a lot of reactionary decision making and a problem that was coming down the pike for a long time and now it's here. Kind of like with Front Beach. It went in, we didn't have a plan, and now we're having to figure out how to fix it, and the ball's already rolling. So more forethought, and a big platform item for me is our comprehensive plan. Okay. And I think that's the perfect place to address that is how do we balance our growth in such a way that it is sustainable and not a hindrance to our downtown businesses.
Right. No, I definitely agree. And the last one was done in 2010?
Yeah.
2010. And so they should be done, every 10 years or so?
Well, so this one was supposed to get us through 2030. So it's 2010 to 2030. But certainly there's got to be a time where we look at it and say, okay, it's been 10 years. Like, what are we doing well? What needs tweaking, and what are we doing poorly, and how do we fix that? How do we get back on track? And is this a track we still want to go on? So there's all these questions, and it's really important for the city to engage the community, because I feel like this administration has not engaged the community with some of the big decisions that are outlined in our comprehensive plan, like the tree committee being disbanded. We no longer have an arborist. There's apparently some precedents have been set about cutting trees that weren't met, by the tree ordinance. Changing the management of the Mary C without engaging the public. Like I said, I'm fine with the city managing it. I support it. But I think it's important to engage the community and get their feedback and let them be the decision makers. I mean, ultimately, the board has to pass it and make the tough decisions. You can't please everybody. But I think more community engagement is what's missing. And if we're gonna veer off of our comprehensive plan, the public needs to be part of it.
Interesting. Okay. So there's some, trees are obviously a big part of Ocean Springs. And you're great at this, by the way. Fantastic segue for me.
Thanks.
Excuse me. When I interviewed Jennifer Burgess, she was the exact same way. Like she transitioned to everything. So maybe women are just better at podcasting.
Maybe we're just better. I'm just kidding, everybody. I'm just kidding.
Oh goodness. So yeah, obviously there's a vested interest in trees in Ocean Springs, and it's not, I don't think that's up for debate. You know, you can't go down Washington Avenue and not understand, you know, what it means. And I tell people all the time, I had to leave Ocean Springs to appreciate what it was, you know, and especially the way that it appears. And again, this is tired at this point from me explaining this, but it's the first time you've heard it. And it's that it seems that when you see the way these large, massive oak trees that have strength beyond, you know, any human potential, and yet it seems that they have just allowed us to live among them. And so it's important, I think, to respect that you know, privilege, if you will. And at the same time, we also have to strike a balance between, you know, I'm a property owner, or I buy a piece of property and I want to live here, have a house here, but these trees are in the way. I mean, how do we strike that balance? Well,
you have to look at, you know, the cost benefit analysis of it. Mm-hmm. And obviously a property owner, their rights should be weighed, but also against that of the public. So, you know, I want to put the property owner first, but let's take a look at it. Let's break it down. And when you think about a tree, you think about the amount of rainwater that it deals with. Because if you look at our comprehensive plan, our number one form of green infrastructure is trees to deal with the stormwater management. So you want to look at that calculation, like how much value is this tree providing? Can we quantify that? And is there a way around cutting this tree? Is there a way that we can cut one tree instead of all the trees? So I think taking the time to really kind of break it down and quantify it is the best way to go about it. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, you never want to make someone unable to build a house on their property because of a tree. I mean, that's you know, that's a no-brainer. You do not want to prevent someone from building on their property. But if there's a way to mitigate the removal of all the trees, certainly, or as many as possible, certainly.
Yeah, I'd say the conflict probably isn't on the ends of eliminating all trees or you don't get to build a home. It seems the contention is on the margin of those two planes. I've heard stories about recommendations being that they make their house smaller.
Yeah.
You know, is that a fair thing to suggest?
Well, I mean, you know,
which to be fair, they're nothing but suggestions coming from these committees that are to the aldermen.
They're suggestions and recommendations, and there are parts of the world and country that are that strict, that say, hey, if you want to build your house amongst these trees, you got to build around them. So, I mean, this isn't a foreign concept, but I think it just, you know, I think it depends, and that's a very I mean, this is an unpopular position for sure that I'm taking on the trees, but you know, we can't sell our values. We can't be for sale like that, and you know, I think having a gentle conversation with someone about maybe having 500 less square feet or something, it's not inappropriate, but you know, I don't know that the city should be requiring people to build their houses smaller to accommodate that. No. But I think having delicate conversations privately with people, and just, you know, trying to figure out if you can do it in a diplomatic way and really try to win them over.
Yeah.
And I think that element's missing. People just come out guns blazing sometimes. And ultimately that person might say, you know what, this is my dream house. I've always wanted it this way. You know, you've gotta let them fulfill their dreams. But there's gotta be, you know, ways to mitigate the damage that's caused by removing those trees. And for me, it's more about the more important thing about trees for me is the city's responsibility for our own trees. So the tree at the Fort Maurepas,
that's a tough one.
The quickness to cut that tree really disturbed me. I mean, to me, the trees are an asset for us. We should prioritize taking a pause, figuring out how we can save that tree. And that was painful to watch and listen to. That, oh, we're just going to cut this tree. I'll make the motion myself. whoa, take a beat. It's winter, close the park. Because I don't think they're at the park with their kids in the summertime playing. Because that tree provides all the shade for that park. Otherwise, the park is just, a flaming surface for kids to burn themselves on.
Yeah.
So, and then too, there's trees on the property of the Mary C that need some attention. So I think, the city needs to focus less on controlling what's happening on private property and invest more in what's happening on public property.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. The tree at Fort Maurepas, so I had one of the other aldermen, and the episode's coming out soon, but they were saying that the issue with the Fort Maurepas tree from his perspective is that he couldn't get somebody to come out and say and put on paper so he could provide a recommendation on what to do about the tree. Mm-hmm. And the only person that would recommended cutting it down and wouldn't address the topic on paper of whether or not the tree could be saved. And so it's like, well, what do you do with that?
Well, I find it hard to believe that we can't find anybody to make a recommendation to get put on paper. I mean, I don't know if they've reached out to.
It might be a liability thing.
Yeah. Well, of course there's there's a liability, but that's why you close the park for a while and try to figure it out. And you put your little orange netting around it and you figure it out. But I don't know if the due diligence was done
to replanting a 250-year-old tree.
I mean,
I'm not sure there's a lot of it. There's probably people on one hand that you could count in America that have experience at that. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a guess.
I know it's not the first. I know we're not the first people to have this problem.
Yeah, I've heard one of the techniques is getting the tree down and driving metal stakes through the base of it to get it replanted as, kind of anchors, but you run the risk of killing the tree anyway.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a tough one for sure, and I don't like it's not an easy decision. But if they've had conversation, and this is from their perspective, they've had conversations with numerous arborists who would give an opinion on it about whether it could or could not be saved. And then the question is, well, could you write that up? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is in the community of arborists that
maybe it's liability.
Yeah, maybe there's some fringe thing too within the subculture of being an arborist where they're like, you don't want to be the one that kills a tree based on your recommendation. And
I don't know.
I'm just being hyperbolic, but in any case, the trees are obviously very, very important, and that's a tough one because that's gonna. Not having that tree there is a real problem, but obviously we need the park too, because a lot of people enjoy going there, you know, and it's also an historical site. So for sure. But do you want to talk about the sands?
I mean, we can. I don't know that I have anything to provide that matters.
Honestly, it seems. I don't know that the city has any involvement at this point. I mean, I'm being told that there's a suit brought against them, but it does seem that the city did their part. They're in agreement with the developer and vice versa. And it seems to be a private issue between the homeowners that would have an issue with their views being obstructed.
Yeah. So I was on the planning commission. My very first meeting was the final plat approval. And I'm advised by the attorney and the commissioners that, once we get to this point, unless these criteria are problematic or if these items are missing, you just approve it. And then later on, I'm discovering I'm like, what's the problem? Why are they suing now? Yada, yada. And essentially, this came down to the definition of the word townhouse.
Oh, I love this.
Yes. So basically, our development code did not have a definition for the word townhouse. So instead of, and this is kind of where the city had its ability to wiggle, to say, okay, well, the ordinance allows for, or the zoning allows for apartments or townhouses. So we'll say that these are townhouses. We don't have a definition for it, so these are going to be townhouses. Well, when you look at the American Planning Association definition of townhouse,
because of course that exists.
It exists.
Yeah.
It exists. It's very clear what a townhouse is and
Okay.
what is being built isn't a townhouse.
Man, I wish I had that definition.
So yeah, well, basically it's just like, when two houses are connected. I mean, it's
I see.
basically like, if all those houses were touching each other, there wouldn't be, in my opinion, there wouldn't be grounds for a lawsuit.
But they're individual.
But because they're not touching, they're not technically townhouses. And so, that's from my experience being on the Planning Commission, that's how we got here. And that's why we're here. And it is a complete mess and a disservice to the community. That area should be, a thriving neighborhood filled with families enjoying the area, generating tax revenue. And I understand why the neighbors, I feel like the neighbors, it was more about, holding the city accountable for following rules. And it's kind of just gotten out of control at this point. And I think and to me, explaining the townhouse element of it is the just like clearest way to understand what happened. So, if they had followed the townhouse definition from the APA, then we wouldn't be here. So,
wow. I'm a junkie for things like that. Well, you're an attorney. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's fascinating.
Yeah.
It really is. I would say it's probably more about something other than the definition but they're leveraging the definition to pursue probably what they actually want.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what it is, but fair.
The person in me who's trying to solve problems and figure out the legal argument. What's the legal argument? Well, your definition of a townhouse was arbitrary and capricious because it's not
and it is inconsistent as a subordinate municipality to the American standard. It is inconsistent or your actions are inconsistent with what the accepted superior definition is.
Yeah. So it's when you're with litigation, what kind of standard? Is this what all the other doctors in your profession with your training in your area are doing? Is this what the, standard building practices for this person is? And
sort of deductive reasoning approach.
Yeah. So I think we have a definition now, and I think they use the APA definition.
It's amazing. Yeah. Because, my line of thinking as you were explaining this was like, oh, well, the city will just make a definition and it'll be likely consistent with what they're building and we'll move on. But again, of course, a higher definition exists of something like a townhome. It's funny in the military, that's the world that exists. Everything is defined. I had a commander tell me one time, nothing you do is guesswork. And there's a reason for that, but there's right down to, there is an Air Force instruction that tells you how to use a shovel. Yeah. Broken down. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I find it fascinating. Okay. So you talked about sustainable growth. Now growth is a hot topic, especially in East Ocean Springs.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your vision for East Ocean Springs?
So for East Ocean Springs, I know they feel left out a little bit because all the action's happening downtown. And that, Highway 90 traffic is a nightmare for a lot of people. I've been stuck in it before. But one of the things I did when I was on the Planning Commission is I went to the City Building Exchange in New Orleans and just was completely fascinated.
What is this?
It's basically just a city planning conference, City Building Exchange. Where
specific to New Orleans, or?
It just takes place in New Orleans. Gotcha. And it's the... I can't remember the organization, but just Google City Building Exchange and you'll see. And I just became super fascinated by planning, city planning, and learning details about how you can design an area to make it feel like it is a town center by adding green space, by shaping the storefronts in a certain manner. And so what I'd love to see happen is we really would have to harness these public-private partnerships where we encourage development in a certain way such that, you know, a good example would be out there where I think the thrift shop is and the UPS store and all that. It's just a ton of asphalt. Is what if you had a developer come in there and, you know, create on the other side, the north side of the parking lot or south side of the parking lot, another row of businesses, maybe a green space in the middle. And people who live in Fort Bayou Estates or off Ocean Springs Road, they could come and have that, you know, downtown city center experience that people like to do. You know, they want to go sit on a patio, listen to music, look at the trees, see people passing by, all that. And so that really fascinated me. And I feel like if we could, you know, work with developers and encourage developers to, you know, kind of go in that direction with their developments, create a safe pedestrian way. Like I said, that's right behind Fort Bayou Estates. I don't know why you can't just, you know, make the sidewalk, I think, already connects to there.
Yeah, I think so too.
So create more of that center city experience out in east part of Ocean Springs. I think people would love that.
I think also what's great about the canvas that is East Ocean Springs is that you can get it right.
Yeah.
You know, you can put in, like I'm fearful of anchor stores. I think we have to tread lightly with the idea of anchor stores. It makes sense. I get it. But you put a big box store there, and likely that's a franchise. Franchises tend to extract money from a city. Through franchising fees, they use established logistics lines. They're not taking advantage of local suppliers and whatnot. So I'd like to tread lightly on that, but I understand the value because Walmart's the perfect example, right? If you put a Walmart down, inevitably you're going to get a slew of other stores. But I forget the woman's name in Madison, but she has a heavy hand when it comes to those things. I think that's kind of the shining example of the way people want to have business come in. You've got to represent us if you're going to take advantage of the business opportunity.
And I think this would help grow and diversify small-owned businesses if they could replicate the downtown experience without the downtown prices. You know?
Yeah.
So I mean, I see it working in several ways. But I think, you know, having that vision is something that, you know, I don't really see happening right now with any of the aldermen. And, you know, so that's kind of how I envision, you know, East Ocean Springs. And then obviously there's going to be a point when we need to look at expanding Highway 90 or widening it. And I think it's imperative that we get the median right and that we can, you know, vibe with the pace and the aesthetic of Ocean Springs, because just, you know, an 8-lane through the center of Ocean Springs, cars racing, you've got the stadium there and all these other little shops that people want to turn off and go to. I think if we can design it in a way that kind of slows things down without people realizing it, if that makes sense.
100%, and that's the problem that I have in the South. This is really big. It's less of an issue, say, out in California and farther west you go, but they have those utility roads where all the businesses are off, and that's great for traffic because traffic stays on the arterial road, but you don't have somebody slowing down to turn off of that. It's a very uncommon thing. Everything has a sort of, you know, ramp that transitions to a utility road. Dallas is a great example. You know, the amount of traffic that flows through there, and yet it's quite pleasant, in my opinion, in my experience driving through Dallas. But that's kind of the issue that I see also, is that we definitely have to get that right, because otherwise we're just going to create another traffic problems. If you've ever looked up phantom intersections, when somebody slows down, which slows down everybody else, which turns into a phantom intersection. We need to have a plan that eliminates that as well. You know, so that's where the idea of the ramps that transition to the utility roads come from. But yeah, certainly that's a great idea. What about? So I've had people describe their vision for East Ocean Springs as what we need in East Ocean Springs would be the same as if Dr. Sangani built East Ocean Springs, just like the promenade.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
That doesn't really jive with Ocean Springs in my mind. That's just a lot of extra traffic, a lot of extra concrete and noise. I just don't, I don't know if that's what the people want. I mean, granted, East Ocean Springs isn't my area, so I'm not knocking on their doors. I've had, heard people say, well, we have to go to Biloxi to go to Big Play or wherever. We have to go to D'Iberville to go to Target. I think that's okay. I think that's okay. And for me, Ocean Springs has always been that bedroom community, that quieter place, slower pace. Certainly, things need to be convenient for people, and however it's developed should make people's lives better. But I don't see that really serves Ocean Springs. I feel like creating more of the downtown ambiance and these little pocket city centers as developments are coming into play, or working with areas where they've done this development 20, 30 years ago. They can't keep tenants. They can't, it's just a revolving door and this giant asphalt wasteland.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we can't partner with them, come up with tax incentives of some sort and say, hey, if you could replicate this, or, do something like that, we could work together with you on something else. I don't know. But there's, and I know other cities do that. They'll incentivize certain developments. I know in our code that when new developments are coming, there's like a point system, and you basically get points for this or that. And I think by painting a clear picture about what we want to happen in our community and really selling it, putting points on the board for people, that they'll be encouraged to do it. And I think those will be more successful than just, put another, strip mall up.
Yeah, that's it's funny you bring that up. I'm supposed to be getting a rendering of the Dollar General, and they had I asked for it, and apparently that's I asked for it after I learned about the point system, and they said it's right down to like you get points for bike parking, like parking for bikes, foliage and whatnot. So I'm kind of interested to see what that looks like, because that was a big surprise to everybody that a Dollar General was put there. Although it crosses this intersection of private property, a private business, and the role of a city to regulate that. Frankly, I didn't know it was happening until somebody around December posted that they were coming into the city because they were traveling in, and they had seen the sign for the Dollar General. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, if we don't have a clear picture of what we want, and we're not proactively cultivating partnerships that can help fulfill our vision, then we're going to get Dollar Generals.
Yeah, look, I get it, and what I'll say is that dollar store signage is about as common as an Alex Shunaraw billboard.
Yeah,
they are everywhere. It seems. And what I didn't know is that some cities actually have ordinances that prevent them from being open within X amount of miles of each other.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's just it. Like, we could have an ordinance like that. I don't know how it all plays out, but what's done is done at this point.
Sure. Well, what are your thoughts on annexing different parts of the area for the growth of Ocean Springs?
We cannot afford that.
No?
No.
It seems that the north of 90, like the plan that I've heard was north of 90 going all the way up to include the shed. Mm-hmm. And from my understanding is that the county's okay with that.
Yeah.
But that's about all they're okay with. I think they're okay with some parts of where the high school is.
Yeah.
Too. Because, the high school isn't even in city limits.
Yeah. So, I've observed that our public works department is understaffed and under-equipped and a bit overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. These are statements, made by the director during alderman meetings when they're being asked, hey, can you plant flowers in my ward's entrance, or can you do this or do that? And that, so, yeah, okay, we're going to get new taxes because we've annexed, but we've got new services. We've got new services we have to provide. We have new maintenance that we have to provide. And I don't believe we're in a position right now to undertake that. This might be something where after a really strong administration and, really stacked coffers, we might be in a position to grow. I don't think we're there yet. We're coming off, I know this administration, we've had a lot of economic development, and, for the first time in a long time, there's actually, some money in the coffers. There was a lot of damage that had to be repaired from the previous administration. So we're in good shape now, but we're about to have a new election. Yeah. I mean, it's, unless we've got really strong leadership that can get us through the next 4 years, I don't think we even need to be thinking about that.
Well, to be fair, you'd be part of that leadership, right?
Yeah, if I'm elected.
Right. If elected. And I guess what I'm not involved in how a city runs, but the consistent message is that you can't, you've got to grow, because otherwise you get constricted as a city and you can't move anywhere else. And plus, the access to have parts of I-10 in your city has obvious economic advantages. Yeah. Do you see any benefit there to annexing?
Not yet. Mm-hmm. Not yet. I mean, this is something that might change in the future. We've got several housing and home developments underway right now. Mm-hmm. Between, the inlet is only at 30% capacity. You've got Spanish Cove that's in the works. A couple on Ocean Springs Road that are underway. The Sands, if they ever get to finish. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of new homes and a lot of new tax revenue. Mm-hmm. But that means more services. So I think we really need to be careful. It has been a good 4 years financially. Mm-hmm. But, we're going to be taking over arts and culture now. What's the budget for that? How are we funding that? I mean, I told you before, we had a $400,000 operating budget. The city provided $20,000 of it. So, a very minuscule amount actually went into programming and staffing. So, so that's happening. And Front Beach is a mess. We're going to have to really work with the county to build on to what's happening now to kind of repair the image of it. There's the sidewalk being built on East Beach. We're going to have to maintain that sidewalk. So, we've still got a lot of work to do. And I think annexing is a bit premature at this point.
Okay. What about Gulf Park Estates?
Same.
I mean, I'm told half the students in the Ocean Springs school district are out of the district, and many of them are in Gulf Park Estates. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. That's a ton of families that, we need to take care of. Mm-hmm. And basically any income generated from them being taxed by the city of Ocean Springs is going to be, to me, leveled out by the services that we have to provide. I'd say the difference between Gulf Park Estates and, say, around the high school is that the land is pretty much all developed. Yeah. And so you're going to have more income per, say, acre, generally speaking, within Gulf Park Estates. But notwithstanding the obvious water and sewer issues that exist within Gulf Park Estates. And that's the biggest issue that I've heard, at least, that's keeping the city, and that has kept the city from even considering annexation of Gulf Park Estates. But, is what it is. But, we've gone through all the... We talked about all the things? Yeah, all the things. So I guess I'll just close it out with, there's three main qualities that I want to bring to leadership, want to bring to City Hall. That is leadership, the ability to, take a position, make an informed decision, and be willing to say, hey guys, let's think about it this way. And make the case for why we should. And then advocacy,
I've talked to a lot of people while I'm out, knocking on doors, and they don't feel heard. They don't feel like they're being heard, and they just want someone to talk to. A lot of times in my profession, it's like, yeah, Judge, we know they got a losing case. They just want you to listen. So it's less about them thinking they're going to win and more about they just want to be heard. They want their representative to hear them and understand their problems and talk to them when there is a tricky issue. And instead of being an adversary, your representative should be your advocate and not your adversary.
Yeah, there are definitely times I've been to a couple of the meetings and I get a sense of almost patronizing, like we kind of have to do this, like from the seats of the alderman, and I can understand why, because one, there's probably not enough time, not an opportunity to actually provide the full facts and details, and so it's very easy for them to view themselves as being, look, we've got the information, we can make the right decision. But the problem with that is that at some level, there's some detail or some consideration that they haven't been given. And that's what bothers me, is the sort of arrogance that you fall into, that all there is to be known is already known. And in the real world, that's just not the case. So.
Well, and I think you can see that too on some of the aldermen who've been there for more than a couple of terms. Mm-hmm. They kind of feel like, I've heard everything, I've seen everything. I know
let's get the show on the road.
I know what's best. Let's go. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think it's important to kind of keep the representation fresh. I certainly don't want to be up there for 36 years. I just think I want to come in and help us get back on track and improve the quality of life for people in Ward 4. And, when my time is done, it's done. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is vision, is that, 30,000 feet above vantage point is, what is Ocean Springs going to look like? How do we, what problems do we need to anticipate and prevent? And how can we shape ourselves in a way that we're defining what we are instead of reacting to what's happening? And so, leadership, advocacy, and vision, it is my strong suit.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. Look, I'll tell you, I say this after every episode, and I mean it. The city benefits when it's a hard decision to make on who to choose, because there is a robust talent pool out there. There might be personality issues, but as far as a group of people that all want to do right for the city based on convictions that they have, that from their experience are tried, true, and tested, and you have to pick from those, I think it's a good thing, considering the class of people that are there. And I'm happy to see you as one of those individuals as well.
Thank you.
So I do wish you the best of luck. And before we go, how can people get in touch with you? How can they support you?
Well, so you can go to Facebook and I have a page, Elect Elizabeth Feder-Hosey for Ward 4.
Okay.
My email is efh4ward4@gmail.com. And so just, hit me up on Facebook or shoot me an email, and I would love to come meet with you. So I'm going to be out there knocking on doors, but if you want to have a more in-depth conversation, I, encourage you to shoot me a message and say, hey, come over, let's talk. And I'm all ears.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And we'll put all that information on the website and on the post as well, so people can get in touch with you.
All right.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thank
I really
you.
enjoyed it. As a blast. Hope it was fun for you too.
Yes. No, I enjoyed getting to talk about stuff. So, yeah.
All right, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.